Good afternoon. My name is Jolie Pettit and I'm the General Manager, Corporate Affairs, Sustainability and Member Engagement at the ARA. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. For me here in Sydney, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on using Ecologiq and the Recycled First policy to build greener rail infrastructure in Victoria. Today's event is brought to us by Priya, who sponsored the ARA webinar series. This afternoon, we are joined by Tony Aloisio from Ecologiq and Priya Pathmanathan from the Department of Transport Victoria. And they'll be telling us about Ecologiq, a Victorian Government initiative that will optimise the use of recycled and reused materials on Victoria's big build projects. Ecologiq will contribute to a circular economy in Victoria by increasing the use of recycled and reused materials and reducing waste on transport construction. I'm looking forward to hearing from Tony and Priya as they share the latest on this initiative and how it's bringing together industry and government to support a more sustainable rail future in the state. Now, we will be taking questions after the presentation today, so at any time during today's proceedings, please post your question in the questions pane on the control panel to the right of your screen. I'd now like to tell you a little bit about our speakers. Tony is the Project Director of Ecologiq and a passionate advocate for creating a purposefully greener future. Before joining Ecologiq, Tony spent 8 years with Fulton Hogan Australia, where he designed and developed their corporate sustainability strategy. He also fulfilled key roles in the delivery of a range of large-scale projects for Boral Asphalt, including the $2.5 billion Eastlink project. Tony completed the University of Cambridge's Sustainability Leadership Program in 2018, inspired by the opportunity to build a society where sustainability philosophy are put into action through carbon reduction and the development of a circular economy. Combines his understanding of international best practice and sustainability with an in-depth local knowledge of infrastructure construction. Priya is an environmental engineer and sustainability expert who is driven by a commitment to enhance our environment and help eliminate our carbon footprint. She currently works within the Network Planning Group of the Department of Transport as a Manager, Operator, Environmental Assurance. Prior to joining the department, Priya was a Sustainability Manager at the Melbourne Metro Rail Authority, which is now Rail Projects Victoria, and oversaw part of the development of the implementation of its sustainability program across 4 complex packages of work worth $11 billion. Priya also has private sector experience, having worked as a sustainability and environmental specialist at Oricon with its infrastructure group, and she is also a member of the ARA's newly formed Sustainability Committee. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Tony and Priya.
Okay, thanks so much, Jolie. Appreciate that. And I'll get this presentation started to tell you a little bit about Ecologiq and then hand over to Priya to bring it all home for us. We want to talk about greener infrastructure today in the railway context. Next slide, please. So as Jolie pointed out, Ecologiq's aim is to increase the use of recycled and reused materials in this big build project. It's a pretty critical time for Victoria when it comes to sustainability and recycling. We know across Australia, but in Victoria in particular, that China's decision to restrict the import of Victorian recyclables means that we will have a growing waste stockpile unless we can do something with those materials. We're expected to generate 40% more waste by 2046 than what we've been generating in 2017-18. And when you take that and as a growing waste stockpile, and you juxtaposition that with the fact that we have this big build at $70 billion plus of road and rail works across Victoria that has a voracious appetite for materials, and maybe the raw material market won't be able to supply sustainably all of that material required for those projects. But we want to turn this problem of a growing waste stockpile into an opportunity and a solution for what the big build will provide for us. That then will leverage us, we hope, into the broader asset network of road and rail network within Victoria. So we'll do that by innovating, by growing our domestic recycling capabilities, by building local markets, creating new uses for recycled materials. you'll see that one of the main aims in all of that is to bring an intentional and uniform approach to what is currently what I would describe as sort of opportunistic use of recycled materials. Really important to acknowledge that the industry and government do use recycled materials and do promote the use of recycled materials. I think my view is that it is somewhat opportunistic and somewhat ad hoc, and it's project by project. What we're looking to do here at Ecologiq is turn that into an intentional, uniform approach that creates a new norm, a business as usual way of delivering road and rail projects that incorporates recycled materials. The next slide, please. So we want to take this unprecedented investment in infrastructure and be recognised as a world leader in the sustainable use of recycled and reused materials. We'll do that in a few ways. Firstly, just directly implementing on the project. So identifying opportunities to increase the use of recycled materials right across that pipeline of transport infrastructure projects. It's really working with projects, working with delivery teams, growing the understanding and knowledge and the opportunity to use materials directly and make an impact, a tangible impact right now. There are other aspects to that, though, that are really important. And one of them is strengthening industry capacity and capability, and that's working with contractors, but also working with suppliers and government partners to support market development. So we really need to match a supply industry of recycled materials with the demand side of things, and that balance is really important. We're already finding in Victoria that in some of our regional areas, the supply capability just isn't there at the moment. So there's the necessity to build that capacity over time as well. Ultimately, that legacy will make that intentional use of sustainable materials the new normal, as I said before. So we're really hoping and expecting that we will create something that's different and that is lasting as the use of recycled materials in both road and rail infrastructure. Next slide, please. So we have these strategic priority areas and they sort of complement what I've just spoken about. Number one, optimising that use in road and rail, really attacking projects as they arrive and understanding the pipeline and delivering on that. A couple of the barriers that need to be broken down. One of them is the approach to technical standards and specification. So changing our approach to be open to innovation and open to creating avenues and pathways for recycled materials. A lot of talk about performance versus prescriptive type specifications, and just how we make that change is a really critical element towards creating a more intentional and uniform way of using recycled materials. The third leg of that is also this market development opportunity. So this is a real talk about building the supply chain of recycled materials to match that demand that I spoke about earlier. Those priority areas are where we're working at the moment, and we're definitely seeing movement in all of those areas. We're starting to see the implementation of the recycled first policy in that black #1 square, and certainly in the Department of Transport. I think we've seen the evolution, and we're seeing an approach where there's an openness and a willingness to consider and to balance the risk-reward equation when it comes to the use of recycled materials, and certainly pushing more towards performance as an aspect. And there's still a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of work that is being done with the supply chain side of the equation as well. Next slide, please. So one of the ways of being very deliberate and ensuring that we're intentional about recycling is by implementing the recycled first policy. So this is the Victorian Government's direct policy. Under the Recycling Victoria banner, we have this recycled first policy, which applies to major transport projects. It requires bidders on major transport projects to demonstrate how they're going to optimise the use of recycled and reused Victorian materials. So really understanding as a bidder that I am being asked and I am proactive about chasing down opportunities to recycle in this bid phase. And I think in that bid phase, there's an assessment phase. So there's a requirement in the tender and in the contract processes for bidders to actually put in exactly what they intend to do in terms of recycling. and that will form part of the assessment of the tender that's submitted. So it applies to all new major transport projects. That's in this major transport in this big build area from March 2020. And then in 2021, we're looking for the Department of Transport and that wider asset world to actually start implementing in that department as well. Ecologiq sort of the vehicle by which we're helping to implement that recycled first across those projects. And I will say we've just had our first couple of projects submit their recycled first plans. So within the Southern Roads network in upgrade network in Victoria, we're now seeing those plans come through, which is really a positive thing for us, and we're really pleased about it. Ultimately, you know, that recycle first thing is a way of deliberately, intentionally moving people towards doing recycling and being very open about it. We'll get this circular economy strategy going as a result. So thanks very much. We'll move on to the next slide. Some of the steps in achieving that, right at expression of interest time, and then putting that detailed recycled first plan into the tender, as I was speaking about earlier. So that recycled first plan will actually outline what materials, what amount of recycling is being done, and what opportunities they are. And then in the delivery phase, a reporting mechanism against that plan on a regular basis as well. Next slide, please. Some of the key principles, optimising the, we talk about optimising the use of recycled and reused materials. So we recognise that logistics, that quality, availability are all part of the equation, and it's not just there's the amount of recycled material in the specification, just do that and be done with it. We take the point of optimising, which to me means maximising the amount you can with the logistics that and with the constraints that are currently in place, but also recognising those constraints, and then we get to work on how we can ease those constraints or how we can break down the barriers. So we're not mandating minimum requirements. We're actually saying you optimise. In future phases of recycle first, we may be able to get to a point of saying this is the minimum quantity that will go into this particular contract. Right now, that's not where we're at, and I'd much rather leave it open really for contractors, because we want to encourage them to submit beyond compliance type offers as well and bids to say, okay, we know we can do this much recycling. We have an idea where we can do more. We have a product that isn't in your specification that we think we can use and that will deliver what we want. So I sort of have we have three ideas around this. One is compliance with current standards and specifications of what's allowable. One is what I call a continuous improvement or a beyond compliance. How can we stretch beyond that? And then there's this breakthrough innovation type approach, and really the tender allows or requests for all of those considerations. And with those come whatever restrictions or, whatever constraints, whatever barriers, whatever variations might need to occur for those extra overtype opportunities to come to play. So it really opens it up for a broad way of thinking, I think. And it all gets captured in this recycle first plan, which then is a nice way to be able to demonstrate and report against. Next slide, please. So I talked about innovation being encouraged. So putting those variation offers in is a nice picture there of a railway track with some recycled plastic sleepers on it there. But it is about going beyond that, and Ecologiq's work with DOT, you know, it's not Ecologiq doing it. It is a whole of government and contractor and supplier sort of collaboration to make these things happen. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk about one of the supporting materials, one of the supporting products that we have available in the market for people to understand what they can do under current specifications. So at Ecologiq, we've developed 3 reference guides. Reference guides for road, which has already been released and been released for quite some time now. and these reference guides identify in one place all of the products that are in the specification that allow recycled content and how much recycled content is permissible under current specification. So whether that's asphalt products or road-based products or ancillary products like roadside furniture and what have you, or rail products, they're inside these reference guides. So we have one for road, which has been released and is available right now. The rail reference guide is, I was really hoping I'd be able to let Priya say, here it is, and wave it around, but it's going to be available, we expect, on Monday. So have a look out for it. It's a really good place to go to. It's a bit like, it's a bit like a one-stop ready reckoner for you to be able to find all of the materials that are permissible in current specifications. If you are interested in these guides, there'll be one for road, one for rail, and there'll be an ancillary guide as well, which will closely follow the rail guide for things that don't actually fit in terms of road or rail particularly, but might go across both and might include things like roadside furniture or other ancillary products that or persons that are part of an infrastructure project. If you want a copy of those, you've got an email address there. You can see ecologiq@roadprojects.vic.gov.au. Drop us a line. We'll be happy to link you up to that. We do have a knowledge hub. Ecologiq has it's like an extranet site that is available for access to, it's a restricted access, but it's available as access for those who, perhaps in government, who can access that, and those guides are also on that, along with lots of other materials, of course. But if you can't do that and you want a copy, please drop us a line at that email, and I'll be more than happy to make sure you get a copy. So with that, I'll hand over to Priya to take charge of the rest of the presentation, and thank you very much.
Sure. Next, please. Thanks, Tony. So as Tony just mentioned, we do have the road guide that's being used on the first, road project, but I'll talk you through a bit of the rail guide. So there's the reuse material, and then there's the recycle. So the reuse, we are looking at the components are rail, turnouts, and special tracks. So partially worn tracks can be considered to reuse on inspection of, when they take it out and put it back in. Rail can be used as, rail guardrails as well, and also donated to heritage rails. The reuse of rails in turnouts can be permitted if the rail profile meets the design specs. So there's also a couple of cool other reuse where I think Western Program Alliance and our Yarra Trams have donated some of the rail guards at the Werribee Zoo. So there's a whole sweep of reuse. Sleepers, so reuse really is typically relates to routine maintenance activities. They really need to be conditioned to see if the serviceability is okay before it can be used, reused, and normally it's reused on the low risk siding areas. Ballast is there's quite a bit of opportunity to look at ballast reuse, and again it'll be subject to approval for what locations it goes in. I know MTM and Ecologiq have been working, and DOT have been working quite a bit on trying to get this opportunity up and running. So redundant material from track can also be reused in general fill. I think at the moment they also use it for tracks along the access tracks, but it does need, if there's fill associated with the ballast, we just need to make sure that VicTrack soil reuse guidelines and EPA guidelines are adhered to. Again, just the note about it's still within RTO standards and specifications. Next slide, please. So the recycling part of it, so the elements that is in the rail guide is crushed concrete. So for maintenance access pavements, structural concrete, and there's some emerging opportunities within rail track and rail track formation as well. Now, recycled glass sand, we have been using that for a bit. I think there was another presentation that level crossing removals were the first ones to sort of give it a go with the drainage backfill of combined service routes. MTM actually has a standard that allows the use of recycled cracked glass wrap. So recycled asphalt material can be used in driver and maintenance walkways, access ways. Definitely a big opportunity is our car parks that are associated with our stations, and approaches to RRV pads and depot walkways as well. And also just adjacent roads. So LXRA, like whenever there's roadways nearby, definitely look at the road reference guide, because they've got some established, RAP is a bit of an established product in the road space. So crumbed rubber level can be used in level crossing panels and rail embankments and sealants. Steel, so recycled steel, again, this area is mature, so I think MTM buys rail from Liberty Steel, and that's already got a component of recycled steel in there. Rio as well, reinforced bars have a high recycled material. There's the mesh rods and wires as well, so they seem to have closed the loop a lot better. So yeah, those materials are available as well. So steel furnace slag, so drainage blankets and capping layers, fly ash in concrete mixes, slag as well in concrete mixes actually. So and with ballast, so it is the recycling of ballast is emerging, but our RTOs have been doing a bit of work on it, especially MTM. So they currently, you can reuse it in track as a drainage blanket in the track formation, and blended for access payments. And reuse back in track. I think there's been a few demonstrations that Alex have started, and MTM are definitely looking into that opportunity as well. Plastics is also an emerging product. So there's the recycled sleepers that Tony spoke about. So we've got some in Richmond Station and some in Wyndham Sidings. It is an emerging product, and we'll see at the moment it's for low speed applications, but that's something that will be worked through. There's also plastic in terms of the pipes, pits and fencing as well. And just another plug for the guide that will, so the road guide that already exists, and the rail guide that'll come Monday, and the ancillary guide soon to follow, not too far away. Next slide, please. So in terms of innovation, we'll just go through. So that's the rail reference guide really clearly articulates what is within spec, and there's also some opportunities to look at look at other extending the spec. So ballast, really the opportunity is to reuse it within the either the track adjacent area. There's the process really is to collate existing information. So there's definitely areas where they've done this in projects. So just making sure we collate the information, know where the trial sites are, see how it's performing. Do we need extra testing done to get those done? I believe MTM they've been doing some of those testings as we speak. And really the next step is really if the testing proves that the performance is they upgrade the spec. And that is work in progress. So track formation. So this is really where we can pull in the experience of the roadside team and incorporate recycled material into the capping layers of our track formations, and really, utilize that knowledge because the road guys have been doing this for quite a bit. SV also have helped with research in this aspect, and I think that's concluded recently. And the next phase really is to identify demo sites and build a bit of a, do the demo and the success criteria for that demo, and then consider what we need to do to the existing standards to incorporate that. Composite sleepers, again, this is something that, as I said, 2 of our operators have already started the journey. So optimising applications for looking at the type approval process and what we need to do to, we've got provisional type approval approvals for this particular product. But yeah, there's definitely a bit of a extra research and market development that will happen if we want to look at what other applications we want these sleepers potentially to be able to be used. Ancillary is probably just being rail as risk adverse. You're just going through some of these processes. I know how risk adverse the rail environment is. Ancillary is a really good, it's a lower risk area. So really optimizing the recycled content in the pavements within rail infrastructure, the station platforms, any furnitures, I'd say like the car park areas, trackside applications, and then really in terms of recycled glass sand in backfill, as well as the combined service route, but looking more at backfill across all the RTOs. Next slide, please. Now I'll just talk a couple of case studies. So next slide, please. So we spoke about, so this is the one around the recycled crushed glass or sand. So level crossing at Williamstown North, it was mid-2018. One of the projects identified that 900 tonnes of glass sand can be used instead of sand in their combined service routes and backfill for drainage pipes. So recycled glass sand, as you know, is made out of our stockpiles of crushed glass, which we have in Victoria. So, and we do now also have suppliers who give us washed and unwashed glass. But yeah, this one has a cost saving, so it's almost half the price for the unwashed, I believe. So and obviously we're helping with that stockpile issue and diverting, because I think those glasses that don't get crushed end up in landfill, unfortunately. So and out of that, there was a trial. MTM actually have changed their spec to make sure that glass sand can be incorporated as a backfill material for their combined service routes. So this is, I suppose, a demo in how that process is. So trial it. If it works, change the standard. And I suppose this recycle first policy is just that one step more to say this is something you can do. So show us beforehand. Are you looking at combined service routes, or are you looking at sleepers? Are you looking at RAP? So next, please. The next, so we'll just say this is the Wyndham Rail stabling yard, and the product is the composite plastic sleepers. So I mentioned we've got nearly 200 at Richmond Station. This one is a siding application, so 120 recycled sleepers in the Wyndham siding. So that was 2019 that they put that in. So the sleepers really have come from quite a bit of work that SV did with our local manufacturer of this waste. So 4 tonnes of plastic in that 120 sleepers were diverted from landfill, and mainly these sleepers are made out of polystyrene and agricultural plastic waste. So all the big wine, the bale covers and the wine vineyard covers, things like that, that normally would have gone to landfill. So yeah, the manufacturer is using it into this composite sleeper. So the performance of these, both actually the 120 and the one nearly 200 in Richmond, are both being monitored, and the trial both really near the end. So we'll get those results soon. There's also some extra trialling that they're looking at to see, to work out if the noise attenuation, so the noise attenuation claims are, I suppose, testable. So we are looking at how we can actually get that as well. I think that's it for me. Can you do next slide? I think it's just a questions. Yes. All right. It's over to questions, Jolie.
Thanks very much, Priya and Tony. That was a great presentation, and it's really exciting to see what you are doing together in this space to create a more sustainable future for rail in Victoria. We have got a lot of questions coming in, so if you do want to ask a question, please go to the questions pane in the control panel to the right of your screen, and go through those over the next half an hour. Priya, I just wanted to start with you. I think you know, when you start a project like this and you're trying something new in an industry that is so grounded in safety, the obvious first question is it safe? So how do recycled materials compare to virgin materials when using them in big rail projects?
Yeah, so look, there are safety considerations are part and parcel of the standard, and the RTO processes are very stringent on that. There are some, so for the crushed glass, for instance, there will the application is through the standard if it's deemed. So there's leachate testing, and there's all the testing that is required to put it in the spec. There's also the aspect of the safety aspect during construction, and that's normally taken care of through a safety, you know, a safe work method statement. So yeah, it's really that goes through a rigorous. Our type approval process definitely looks at safety as one of the key pillars.
And Tony, just talking about that type approval process, I suppose when you're looking at rail projects, the ARA recently did a technology report that looked into innovation and found that sometimes some of the challenges is, you know, a desire traditionally to look at like for like replacement and to sit within specifications without really challenging whether there are more efficient ways to go. I mean, this is a very innovative project. You're looking at doing things differently, and you're having to look at specifications and type approvals and think about whether there is an opportunity to evolve there. How has that process been so far, and you know, what's been the early, I suppose, challenges and opportunities out of that?
Look, one of the benefits I have is seeing both the road process, if you like, and the rail process, and certainly in rail, very understandable that there's a risk-based approach. There is in both, obviously, but it's a highly risk-based approach, and the risk of failure is pretty important to everyone in the rail scene, as is the whole of life cost of a product. I'm understanding that. There's a bit of feedback going on there somewhere. Hopefully we've got that sorted. But I think the challenge for us to demonstrate that a product, a different innovation performs, and I think this concept of performance-based specification versus what might be empirical or historical evidence-based approach is really where the balance needs to be understood. Things like these trials that we're doing at Wyndham Vale and at Richmond are valuable, but they're only valuable to the extent that there is a process in the trial that actually comes to a clear conclusion and a clear opportunity and a clear pathway that might require further validation or that validates the project. So I like to sort of change the terminology from trial to validation projects, so that we actually validate something, and or we don't validate something. And I think that's really important to actually say, yes, this product is valid, it is useful. And the only way that I see to get there, or the way to make that change, is to start to consider performance-based characteristics rather as an important aspect to how a new product is considered, rather than prescriptive or empirical approaches, but to have a balance of both of those things in your considerations. I don't know, Priya, if you want to add to any of that, but I think that's the that's probably the important part in taking an innovative product through to conclusion. It's worth saying that timber sleepers were how all rail was produced, because that was the product that was readily available everywhere. And now, from a sustainability point of view and from a long-term cost point of view, it just doesn't make sense. Concrete sleepers were an innovation, and somebody had to take a step, had to take a leap of faith. Someone had to understand the cost benefit and the cost risk to actually take that on board. And now it's business as usual. So, you know, that's a perfect model of saying, hey, you know, something that was innovative is now today's norm. Who remembers when plasma televisions were innovated? They don't even exist anymore, right? In that fast-moving consumer world, or iPhones. You know, who remembers their first phones? You know, that was so innovative. You know, and so somebody needs to, and we, you know, need to help facilitate that approach to taking innovation through to taking that leap that balances risk, that balances performance, and that acknowledges the empirical or the prescriptive way of doing things from the past. It's a bit of a philosophical answer.
And yeah, there is a little bit of a section around that in the rail guide in terms of the type approval process. So everyone wants to know timeframes, and that's really hard because it is based on the risk. So what kind of lab testing is required and what kind, and it is really, and one of the differences with the road and rail is the road standards are directly within DOT and the rail standards sit within our RTOs. So we're a step removed, but we are working through those issues, and there's a bit of clarity on that on these reference guides as well.
And Priya, as you're going through that validation process and you're testing the strength of the innovation across various measures, are you thinking about whole of life costs, and have you noticed any difference in terms of perhaps durability or what you expect to get out of recycled materials compared to what would have been used more traditionally?
So whole of life considerations are definitely looked at, but we can't sort of, you know, wait for empirical evidence to wait that long. So there's testing, there's obviously lab testing to sort of show, you know, will it, you know, last as long. So say most products we do look at it. There's also, I suppose, a level of if there's a waste stream that the state really does need help with, whether, you know, whether there's a compromise in that. But at the moment, with all the specs, all the products that we look at, it is really, we do look at that life cycle and make sure that, so the composite sleepers, for instance, it's a 50-year life cycle, just like the concrete sleeper. Now they've done their testing for it. It hasn't, there's not lived trials for that, or demo. What did you call it, Tony? Validation. But yeah, that's really what we have to do in these areas. So, and another one is ballast, I suppose. You know, if it meets the spec, then really the life, the life of it should be the same as, you know, a virgin product.
And I mean, you're obviously working very closely with the industry to ask them for their solutions. You know, when you're talking about going through that validation period, obviously that will sometimes take a bit of time. Priya, from a government point of view, how are you working with private companies to sort of develop these innovations and move things forward?
Yeah, well, in Victoria, we're really lucky because we've got Sustainability Victoria, and I forgot to give a plug to Buy, and we'll definitely give that. So there's a Buy Recycled website where anyone who's got a recycled product, so from, you know, I think a couple of things that we didn't speak about is things like geomesh or geofab, which I know, you know, if you I know there's a product that's recycled. So anyone who's got recycled products we've got to register. And Sustainability Victoria really do that R&D side. They and one of the lessons learned is getting our rail operators engaged early in the R&D process. So like I spoke about the track formation, they also helped with the recycled composite sleeper product. So giving them R&D, some R&D funding, as well as helping them out with the lab tests and that kind of support. So yeah, Sustainability Victoria in our Recycling Victoria policy, there is definitely an arm for innovation and an arm for R&D, and them along with Ecologiq, we will work together to, so it's probably more an Ecologiq question, but yeah, it's getting, we've got very close, we meet almost monthly with SV, and they have a pipeline of R&D projects looking at different applications.
Well, and on that, you mentioned that you've got a register in progress. And Tony, I'm interested to hear about that a little bit more, because you were talking about matching that supply and demand between, you know, having the materials available and then matching them to the right projects and the right uses. That sounds like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, how do you go through that process, and how do you get the even balance between supply and demand?
So look, it is a jigsaw puzzle, and it's one that's evolving all the time. So it's actually a moving jigsaw puzzle. So if you think about a jigsaw puzzle and put it in 3D, I guess you've sort of got the sort of challenges. Just in terms of the recycling register, I sort of think of that as a yellow pages for recycling suppliers. So if you've got a recycled product and you want to promote it, make sure that you've got it in that yellow pages. And you know, a good way for people to think about it is we've got our reference guides, which we spoke about earlier. Now, if you go to the reference guide and finding that there are these allowable recycled materials, you can then use the SV yellow pages, I'll call it, to actually find who can supply that particular recycled product that you've identified. So that's sort of like a nice standard, simple approach of stuff that is available now. The next piece of the puzzle is actually being able to find new suppliers, emerging suppliers, and being able to link them with, if you like, with contracted markets. So we do that a few different ways. It is about reach. These types of forums are part of the reach things. Part of that reach thing also is working with other government departments. We talk about sustainability in Victoria, but DELT and the like, and the waste resource recovery groups around Victoria. We link in with local government who are actually accessing curbside waste, right? So what are they doing with that, and actually linking with those people and finding out, are they capturing, what materials are they capturing, where's it going, how's it being used, and linking that to marrying that to our demand side of our projects and identifying the pipeline, which is always a moving piece as well, and trying to make that happen. We've commissioned a few studies as well to actually create a supply and a demand model based on all the projects in our pipeline, and saying, righto, here is the demand model. We know we are going to be using this many tonnes of, we have the potential to use many tonnes of reclaimed asphalt based on these projects being delivered over this period of time. Then going and doing the same thing on the supply side, saying, where are the suppliers, how much supply material is available. Sustainability Victoria doing some of that work, we're doing some of that work. So that provides a macro level opportunity to understand how to do that. And then we're working with markets, suppliers, to work at how can we facilitate their growth and their development, and into what areas. So it is a jigsaw puzzle. It's a moving piece, and it requires a whole range of components to come together. But it is, it's like a massive funnel. I'm seeing it actually start to more shape and actually find its way towards solutions, and we'll get there. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Well, look, can I make your jigsaw puzzle a little bit more complicated? We've got lots of people from outside of Victoria wanting this to go national. So is there a potential to expand this so that it is something that is more nationally focused in the future?
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah.
I know.
I think in terms of rail, we are working with some who are connected across all of the rail networks. So I think that's very true and very available. We're also talking regularly. In fact, just before this webinar, I was talking to some people in Western Australia who are going down the same journey and doing it slightly differently, and therefore that's my dog barking in the background. he wants to come in and he's being led outside, just so you know. But they're going down a similar journey and trying to parallel their paths or understand the pathway we've taken as well. So we're starting to connect. We've done the same with Queensland and with Canberra and with South Australia. So we're starting to connect and link up and share some of our learnings and some of our lessons. We've found that in Victoria, we're ahead of the game in some places, in some aspects. The Recycle First policy is a bit different to anything anyone else is doing, and the procurement pieces of that are of a lot of interest to people. At the same time, some of our other people have created these forums for suppliers and contractors to meet, and we've actually paralleled some of that ourselves with a meet and greet session between the merchant suppliers and contractors to try to get them to get to know one another, I think, and leave them to their own devices to make the arrangements for the use of recycled materials. So there's a range of activities that are going on. The R&D that we will do in future will be, and particularly in the rail space, will be national R&D in essence, because it'll be shared amongst these rail industry associations as well. Hopefully that answers some of that. Yeah.
It sure does. And Priya, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Recycle First policy, because we've had some people talking about the fact that they really like in the presentation. There's been discussion on both reuse and recycling. Now, there is the Recycle First policy. Do you think there would be a dedicated reuse strategy, or do they really go hand in glove?
I think it's the waste hierarchy. Avoidance is before anything, really, and then it's, you know, so minimise, avoid. Like, yeah, do you really need that strength? You know, like a concrete. But I don't. I think it's the circular economy is based on the hierarchy, and I think that's, you know, our state policy is we're just a small part here. We're really just optimising the big build, and you know, there's a big build and there's that scarcity of materials and just things going to landfill. So it made sense we're utilising the big build. But look, I know Tony is keen and we are keen to make sure that it is not only infrastructure projects, that councils, I think there's a small part of our Recycling Victoria policy that does look for councils, because they do like some pretty cool, like they're pretty active in this space as well. So we're hoping that these guides are useful for them as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And look, talking of the big build, I mean, obviously there's a real opportunity here with the scale of activity to really make a difference at this moment with a policy like this. Without a mandate in place, what sort of take-up have you seen, or enthusiasm even, from the industry to really get behind initiatives like this?
Well, I'll jump in to start with, but you know, we talked about LXRP, who are the level crossing removal program. They've been very innovative in the recycling space and in a number of other social engagement type spaces for some time without a formal Recycle First policy in place. So, like anything, sometimes policy catches up with what people are doing. In other cases, strategic imperatives, and this is a strategic imperative that has come from a particular problem. I think there's two ways to look at recycling. One is, yeah, we've got this, and we've articulated today, we've got this mountain of waste stockpile problem potentially occurring and putting materials into waste stockpiles, and we're looking to divert that from landfill to actually a useful product, and that makes a lot of sense for Victoria in many ways. It's also the right thing to do. Right? You don't want to take reclaimed asphalt and the bitumen, which took millions of dinosaurs' deaths to actually create all those years ago, and actually do it, and then use it for 30 years and then dump it in a waste landfill place because it's no longer useful. So there are the two aspects to it, and I think much of recycling has already taken that on board in the past. So we're now taking that and making that just far more intentional and saying, let's do this all the time, everywhere, and follow a process to actually ensure that lesson that is coming from a range of projects actually gets spread across everything we do and becomes this. I think that message of intentional and deliberate versus ad hoc and opportunistic is really important. It's that flip in thinking that says, I will understand this every time and I will apply it every time, and I think that will make the difference. So the Recycle First policy provides a mechanism to do that, to make it intentional, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because look, those projects like LX and Metro Tunnel, because they were, there's the ISCA framework, and ISCA has one of the credits is around diverting landfill, and they've got a materials one, not quite recycle, it's just more about carbon. But those projects that have been doing ISCA ratings, we've found that they do chase, that there's definitely a support, or they actively chase it. But yeah, it is, or if it costs less, they do that. But yeah, as Tony said, this is really just about having a consistent approach, and also that information feeding back in. So we would have had, you know, crushed concrete instead of crushed rock, or we would have had like the example of the crushed glass, because it was half the price. So it's just making this consistent, and obviously then we would be able to say what percentage, you know, of our build, just having that data back, which is another thing that we have to improve on. So, yeah.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit about engaging rail professionals in the process. The ARA's Young Leaders Advisory Board has sustainability as a focus area, because they've really recognised that for young people, sustainability issues of critical importance and a key driver to why people want to work in the rail industry. Priya, in your experience in the department, how have people responded to your work in this area, and are you seeing more engagement with young people as a result?
Did you say, what was the second part? The younger people, did you say? Younger?
Are you seeing more engagement with young people in your team?
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I suppose within the department, look, waste, climate, like there's those key issues, you know. We've got a new Environmental Protection Act also coming in. So, and I think the last update was 50 years ago, so well overdue, but it's coming in next year. But that has a really big focus on human health and the environment, and it's a proactive approach. So I think that our Climate Change Act, which has a net zero, you know, target, as well as our waste problem, like these are all, these are actually, so there's 3 or 4 sort of guiding laws that we have in Victoria, guiding acts. Our Transport Integration Act actually has, you know, one of its key objectives is around environmental sustainability. And yes, the younger, look, I really think everyone should be engaged in this, you know, and especially the old generation, because they need to help the younger generation. But yeah, it's definitely one of the focus areas that we're driving anyway. So it is a new department. So we've, for the people interstate, Public Transport Victoria and Vic Roads on emerged last year, and we became Department of Transport. So it is, we're still, you know, going through setting the environmental and sustainability policy, and we're setting, and we've got these mandated climate change mitigation and adaptation plans. So all of that together, there's definitely more, I can definitely see more work. Sometimes I feel in the rail industry, because rail, we just consider it green because we are obviously mode shifting a lot, but I still think, you know, obviously it's pretty evident there's lots more we can do. We just need a little bit of the wheel.
Well, and it looks like you've definitely started that journey. Tony, just to finish off, if you're a contractor out there or someone bidding for work on one of these projects, you want to look at how to really enhance your use of recycled and reused materials and what you're putting forward, I mean, where should you start if this is a relatively new area for you?
So I think like any contractor who's on a project, it's really important to engage with the client up front and understand that the client is the place where you will get decisions made and get opportunities made, and to actually establish your will and wish to actually engage in that. That's the starting point. I think from there are probably a few avenues that matter. Firstly, Ecologiq is a great place, you know, in the road and rail space in the big build, to actually make contact, and we've contact with a heck of a lot of suppliers and contractors already. I think also going through your industry association who have access to Department of Transport standards and specifications people, and to decision making, policy making sort of people in departments of transport that perhaps as a contractor you don't see direct access to unless you go through those types of organisations. You know, there are avenues to go towards that. I think also you need to be open and inquiring and inquisitive. So when a strange supplier rings up and says, "I've got something here," it's really worth asking why. You know, what does it do? Why? And what's the value of it? Because that information is pretty open and pretty available. Contact and getting to understand, and coming from outside as a contractor, I didn't really fully understand and appreciate the complexity and variety of government departments and what they can and can't do and how they interact. I don't even know if government, to be quite honest, but I think there's great avenues through Sustainability Victoria and through understanding where, because they have, you know, access to market funding and research and development funding as well. So there's a number of different avenues to go to, and you know, sometimes you just have to look over the fence as well and say, what are they doing? You know, what are those guys doing down the road or girls doing down the road that's different to what I'm doing? And you'll find that everywhere. So you know, there's a number of places. By all means, there's the Ecologiq email address that I've put up there earlier, and it's sitting there right now. You know, drop us a line with that, and we'd be really happy to help and support.
Yeah, at least redirect. Yeah, you can redirect you to the Buy Recycled website as well, and SV people. You know, if they're early on in their journey, but yeah, if they're a bit more, you're after people who haven't dabbled in any recycled content yet. Is that what you are?
Well, I think people just starting that journey, and you know, whether they maybe have dipped a toe in before or just starting out, you know, how can we best encourage them? It sounds like there's a lot of resources that are out there for them to access.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you very much, Tony and Priya, for all of your time today and your valuable insights. And the ARA will share those details on how to access the guide when it's released next week, and we very much look forward to that. And thank you for joining us and sharing your questions as well. After this, a short feedback survey will be sent to you soon, so I encourage you to share your thoughts with us to help inform future events. And we do have many more webinars scheduled over the coming weeks on a variety of topics. Next Wednesday's webinar is on addressing antisocial behaviour on and around railway, and we'll be featuring a panel discussion with security experts from Sydney Trains, Queensland Rail, Keolis Downer Gold Coast, and the Griffith University Criminology Institute. So I encourage you to jump onto the ARA website and register for that. And if you would like to hear more about sustainability issues like this, Ausrail has a dedicated sustainability stream for the very first time this year. Registrations are now open, so please secure your place to take advantage of specialist content like this and many other streams. Ausrail takes place from the 1st to the 3rd of December, and you can find more at ausrail.com. Once again, thanks very much for joining us. Have a lovely afternoon and stay safe, everyone.
Thanks. See ya.
Yeah.